right. Well, welcome to this version of ISSA Denver Live Tech Talk. Today we are joined by Dan Ayala. Well, welcome. How do you pronounce your last name?
Ayala.
Thank you. Founder and managing partner at Socratic, and Doug Brush, VP of Awesomeness at Special Counsel, a host of the second highest rated security podcast in the Denver area, Cybersecurity Interviews. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Greg. It's good to be here.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, Doug.
So I've been 3 years as of this past month, a Denver Boulder resident, and really came from New York, where I was born and raised, and came out to the beautiful area of Denver, like I said, 3 years ago. About 25 years in IT services, and the last 12 exclusively on cybersecurity, everything from digital forensics, litigation, governance, risk, compliance, really the whole boat of end-to-end, from when the crap hits the fan to protecting the house. So really kind of working on all areas of cybersecurity and risk management for organizations.
Sounds good. How about you, Dan?
Well, I'm Dan Ayala. I'm 25 years in security. I'm one of those folks who came up through infrastructure. So I've been doing security and firewalls and perimeter VPNs since the mid 90s, and have done just about everything across the suite from incident response, vulnerability management, secure application development, organizational design, architecture and strategy. And for the last 7-8 years now, have been doing the CISO role for various companies. And it's been really fun to watch the security industry evolve and grow.
Yeah, it certainly has. It's been a fun time for everybody here in this industry. One last housekeeping note before we get into this. If anyone has any questions, feel free to type them into the Denver ISSA Slack, or I should say the ISSA_Denver Slack channel on Colorado Equals Security, and I will see about getting them interspersed into the presentation here. So with that, I guess we'll get into our first slide.
Yeah, so I think the topic of discussion today is about starting your own security business. Both Doug and I have done this, and we've been part of growing security programs inside businesses. But we want to talk through a little bit about what it takes to build your own, to go out on your own. I think we're at a point in time, and Doug, please feel free to chime in. I think we're at a point in time in which there's a lot of need out there. The small and medium businesses and even large and enterprise businesses continue to need more and more security support. There's less and less security staff, and I think for me, focusing on the small and medium businesses, where there's the exact same need and the risks are even higher, was something that was really really interesting to do. But I think the first question out when you decide you want to go out on your own or start a business or start a product or service related to security is, why am I doing this? Doug, is it just about the money? This is the first question out. How much money can I make doing this?
Yeah, no, if you go in for the finances, it's probably the wrong reason to do it. There's very, very few unicorn stories, meaning that somebody has this magic idea, and with 3 months, they're getting their first round of funding. In 2 years, they have a multi-million-dollar exit. Incidentally enough, I've had quite a few people on the podcast, and my podcast is really focused on a lot of the founders. My experience has been, my journey was starting my own IT services company in the 90s. I grew up in IBM land in upstate New York, around Poughkeepsie, New York. Literally mainframes were manufactured down the street from me. The parts, global distribution, were all done there, from there to Vermont. And everybody said, well, look, you like technology. Why don't you go learn mainframes? I'm like, absolutely not. There's no reason I'm going to go learn COBOL, until I realized recently that actually that's what people are hiring for in the past 3 months, which is odd with the global pandemic. But, it was not something I was interested in. I saw the rise of endpoints being Windows-based computers. 75-80% of computers being sold in the mid-90s were Windows-based computers. This thing called the internet was kind of catching on. I think it's still pretty popular these days. And businesses were adopting that. People were adopting that. And I said, I want to figure out how to make that work and make that scalable to small businesses. I started my own small business addressing those needs for many small companies and then growing into enterprise clients and providing a lot of different services and pivoting to different solutions and products. But never at that time was I thinking, oh, geez, this is going to be a landfall of money. It was more about controlling my own destiny. Quickly, I did find out, and I was very fortunate to kind of grow up with entrepreneurial parents that had their own businesses, wrote several books, speakers, and really kind of were able to kind of help me incubate what I was doing at an early stage and help get things like press. And it was really kind of great to have that support system. But even then, with a good support system, you still feel very out on your own, which is good and bad. For me, I love that feeling at times. Currently, I'm more in a role of an intrapreneur, meaning taking a lot of those entrepreneurial skill sets and bringing it inside a company to incubate and build a set of services. Again, that has its own pluses and minuses. But there's a lot of reasons people want to take something to market, whether it's a product or service. But really asking yourself, why am I doing this becomes an important thing. Is it something that maybe this is something you can take to somewhere else and you don't have to have the overhead of running a business? But it's something that I think is a very cathartic, introspective question that people have to kind of go through and really kind of document why they want to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the two gut reactions you have to hold yourself back from are the desire just to make a lot of money quickly, and two, to run away from an organizational structure into quote unquote freedom. Potential end results, long road to get there. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess after that, not just thinking about why am I doing it, but you also have to think about what can you realistically do. What skills and experience do you have? What leadership skills, managerial skills, and technical acumen do you have to bring to this? One example is, I guess, in my journey, I've realized that there is a whole lot of breadth to building a company beyond just being able to do good security or good privacy or good consulting or speaking the language of the businesses we've served. There's a whole piece. If you think about your role, your time in a business, in a larger established business, there's all of these other functions, from finance to marketing to billing to accounts payable to that are part of making sure that business operates. When you start your own enterprise, you have to deal with all of those end to end. And one of the key things that I think I've taken away with this is going into it on your own makes it infinitely more difficult. But at least have it, and you can't have all those services to start, but partnering with somebody. There's a book called Rocket Fuel that a great friend of mine recommended that I'm a big fan of. And when we get to the end, we've got some of the references. But this book is about starting off a business with two people, one that can be the visionary and the driver, and the other one that can be more of the operational, hey, let's get this stuff done. And those two pieces together really do fit and make a great combo, something to consider.
Yeah, along those lines, a book that I found early on, and I think what Dana was saying too is, well, as we were preparing for this presentation, incidentally enough, a lot of the ideas for this presentation came out a year ago as I started putting together, because I would constantly find myself not only mentoring or coaching people on their individual skills as they were part of an organization, but folks that said, gosh, I want to take this product and go to market, or I have an idea for a service. And I would say, look, pump the brakes a little bit. And it kind of came out of that. But, certainly now with the market changes, I've seen a lot more people show that interest or wanting to go out on their own. And, it's really identifying what kind of person you are within an organization and how you're going to define yourself outside of that organization when it's your own. There's a manager, there's, a leader, engineer. These are different types of roles that you need to understand how you're going to fit in. And then, one of the things we really say is doing the SWOT analysis, or strength, weakness, and opportunities, both on your individual basis and on a product or service you're going to go out to market with, because there's going to be things that you're not good at. I think one of the things that a lot of people feel that they can do is they look at it and say, well, I'm an engineer, so I can build a product better than anybody else. Therefore, I'm better than my manager who manages people. Engineers manage and look for technical solutions, where managers are looking for people solutions. Two different kind of outcomes around different problems, or sometimes the same problem. So the approach has to change in people's mindsets. So just because you're good in one role doesn't make you go to another. Same with managers that say, hey, well, geez, the C-suite and the board just doesn't get what I'm trying to get my team to do. And sometimes that's a function of poor leadership inside an organization, not giving out the strategic goals, but therefore that doesn't mean the manager has the best strategic vision either. There's a lot of moving parts. And as Daniel said, as you take on different roles, as you start building your organization and going out on your own, you find yourself having to wear various hats, sometimes at the same time, and then trying to divide that labor. If you're doing co-founders or bringing in business-to-business relationships, maybe subcontractors, it's quickly finding out what you're good at, what you're capable of. And there's a really great book that I highly recommend called First Break All the Rules. And it's about the idea of addressing skills versus talents, two very different things as an individual. It's really good for a manager to look with inside his organization. I always say managers tend to look down where leaders tend to look at the horizon. Strategic, it would say, is more in the leadership, where managers are more tactical and day to day. And that book helped address how do your individual people can break down those different areas. But I also found it was very good to do those introspective kind of skill finders for myself. And an adjacent kind of set of work to that book from Gallup was strength finders, and how to do individual kind of assessment of what you're good at, and having a level of acceptance that you're not going to be good at everything. And you need to figure out where to fill those gaps so you can focus on what you're good at.
Well, one of the things you mentioned there sort of struck me as interesting. I was wondering if I could get you, both of you, to kind of expound on it. I mean, we've all heard of entrepreneurs, but you mentioned the word intrapreneur, and I was sort of curious exactly what you meant by that.
Sure. So, as an entrepreneur, and I'll kind of, from the entrepreneur myth book, that again, it addresses this idea that not all people that are technically good at doing something, maybe you're good at coding or doing certain things, that you go out to be an entrepreneur. And again, there's those roles that go with it. But the idea is with inside of either being an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur, which is you take, again, a lot of those skill sets of what it means to be an entrepreneur, and I'll get to that in a second, bringing that into an organization. Trade-off there is you might be getting a salary or held to some individual contributor type role where you're getting a percentage off a P&L, but something where you're taking your entrepreneurial vision and bringing it with inside an organization. I find it gives a little bit of a safety net, but you do give out, you lose some of that independence. But the idea that, or something that really struck me when I read the entrepreneur myth, was it said, if your business depends on you, you don't own a business. You have a job, and it's the worst job because you're working for a lunatic. The idea is to get yourself out of that process, that if you design something that you think, I can make something, whether it be a product or service, run better, it's how quickly, when you process flow that out, is you can get your butt out of those boxes, from decision-making to financial concerns, whatever it is, that things can operate independently. And the idea is you want to build a set of systems that don't depend on you. So you go in strong as an entrepreneur and intrapreneur, and you build something that, from the ground up. And the idea that you build it to a level of automation where you're not needed anymore. That's very tough for both the entrepreneur and the intrapreneur, because they want to feel that value. Like, oh God, if the business isn't running on my blood, sweat, and tears, how's it going to work? It's quite the opposite. And I think that's a common mistake a lot of people do in both those roles. And particularly if you're working for an organization, you can't scale there. Therefore, and really, what is your value? If you're bringing in this new vision of idea, how do you move yourself to a new vision of idea if you're so stuck in your current product?
Yeah, and as an entrepreneur, it's as Doug said, it's really nice to have that safety net, but you can take the entrepreneurial spirit and bring it in and incubate within some structure, and it's a good stepping stone to see how you relate to the idea of taking something from cradle to grave, or from cradle to implementation, before doing it on your own.
Sounds good. Well, I guess if you're an entrepreneur, something that's probably pretty important to you is the market. I'd hazard a guess when you've first put this presentation together, the market was a little different than it is today, for many reasons. I'm curious, what do you think made the market useful then, and has anything, or if anything, changed between then and now?
Well, I think a year ago when Doug and I first started talking about this, the market was a lot different. Well, heck, 8 weeks ago, it was a lot different. But I think there's a lot of underpinnings that are the same. We have easy access to technology, both free and inexpensive. We have the cloud. We have well, now we all have home working spaces, but when we return to work, we have co-working spaces, so you can have an office without having to invest in actual real estate. Ease of access to offices. We have virtual assistants that can help keep us, give us the view, give the world a view of a mature business, even as we're getting started. But I'll start one quick aside on free resources. It's really enticing as you're getting started to think about the option to use free or very low cost services to build your business upon. But I wouldn't be the privacy person that I am without mentioning that often there are strings attached to those. Look at the type of data that is being used by those companies, if they're selling it or using it in some other way, or may even be using it to eventually compete against you. Think about those before deciding to go with free products versus looking at some of the paid ones. And we'll talk a little more later about getting some of the funding to do so. But definitely a lot of resources out on the internet, and cloud services that can help you get your system, services, or products launched quickly and inexpensively.
Yeah, I had to say early on in the 90s when I was putting together business plans for how I was going to launch various startups, I had to look at things such as office space, advertising, telephones, internet, furniture. If I was going to maybe get into, even then it was kind of new, shared workspace where I was renting some space from a law office that was going to help me get my mail. And then I was using off hours groups to answer the phones. And it was a lot of effort to kind of build that technology. And I'm having a little bit of a, get off my lawn, you kids, even though I still think I'm relatively young, but what resources are out there now to do a startup when it comes to financial software, when you're doing accounting, bookkeeping, things like that were expensive and cumbersome before, to things like voice over IP that you have now kind of all over, and you can have your phone ring your computer, ring your cell phone, and you can kind of be anywhere and do these follows. There's a lot of resources that can be leveraged now that were much harder. And the beauty of that is, as we kind of talk about building out a business plan, and what that means is, as you figure out there's a lot of resources are going to be, you're generally paying a fraction of what you would have even like 5-10 years ago. So you can get into things like a WeWork space with a phone and an internet at a very fixed cost. And it allows you to kind of project what maybe 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months is going to look like in your startup journey as you start to build. Because one of the challenges as you really kind of develop your business plan and thinking about, kind of measure twice, cut once, it becomes, how am I going to pay my expenses? How am I going to pay myself? I mean, that's a common, I think, pitfall a lot of people have when they develop their business plans, is not putting in the right types of things that's going to allow themselves to be properly compensated so they can pay their bills at home. We'll talk more about corporate structures, but the idea is that you want to be able to sit there and say, here's what's going to come in, here's what's going to go out, and hopefully you're going to get more coming in than what's going out. And right now, there's just a ton of resources for startups that allows them to be a little bit more agile and lean in that regard.
Yeah, and in the same way, you can plan. I think you mentioned this, Doug, the 30-year fixed mortgage mindset. I remember when going back to my first company in the mid-90s, same thing, building infrastructure for over the fledgling internet. I paid for every long distance call individually. Now you pay a little more for your package, but it's bundled. It's predictable. I know it's going to be $20 a month every month. And I can get a better idea of how much runway I have with the funds I have and how much revenue I need to drive in order to make it all happen.
Absolutely.
So it sounds like there's lots of technologies and opportunities. And so let's say I'm, Joe Entrepreneur. I figured out what I want to do and I know what type of business I want to do. So what's next?
It really is, kind of developing that business plan. And again, growing up in or coming into entrepreneurship in the late 90s, I don't think it was just starting to come out with a lot of these more kind of lean and agile methodologies, even before it was those terms of how to start something up. A lot of it was, you had to have this cumbersome long business plan because your goal was to get financing to pay for all those capital expenses and your operational expenses. It was just, everything was heavy going in. So if you're saying, I'm even going to try to get $250,000 in revenue, probably got to spend at least that in the first year or two just to get up and running. So you had to build these complex business plans. What I found is I was a very early adopter to trying to bring in a lot of these lighter and remote technologies to do things, and started finding things about writing more lighter business plans. And at that time too, there was a lot of resources from the Small Business Administration through the federal government and state agencies that were fostering a lot of this kind of entrepreneurial spirit. And so I was able to reach out to the SBAs. There was SCORE, which is senior corporate. I forgot what it sounds like. I put that in our kind of notes, but it's basically senior executives that help people on their business plans and going forward. And there was, more software out there now. So the idea is that you really want to kind of develop this good mission statement around what you want to do. And the mission statement should really tell you, how will I know when I've succeeded? That kind of idea that I'm going to put forth something that is meaningful, but actionable and confined. So the idea is, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and it should be inspirational to do this. It should make you feel that I'm going to go to point A to point B and what this is going to look like. From there on the business plan, you want to continue to write out all your financials. So you're going to have that kind of mission objective of what you do, supporting and how you're going to do it and why, and then breaking down the financials. And again, right now there's a ton of great resources out there. And we'll put some of these in links that we'll share later, but you don't have to go crazy writing this very long business plan right now, but you should have something down, because getting it out of your head and onto paper is a good cathartic experience to really kind of make you focus and develop that vision of idea of what you're going to do and account for all those expenses. Like I said, we just rattled off 10, 15 things that might affect you. Maybe it won't. Maybe you need multiple licenses. Maybe you need one. But going through and doing that measuring stick becomes really important to know what you're getting into.
Yeah, and I can't say enough good about the SBA. Small Business Administration has so many resources available for getting started, and they've really evolved as this marketplace has picked up as well. And if you were in business going into some of the more recent crises, there were tools available. There were financial remedies available to small businesses as well to help keep you going through some of the tougher times. So definitely take a look there. The other was, Doug, you talked about setting some mission statements. What about, how do you look at the mission statement you tell yourself and the mission statement that you put out wider?
Yeah. You really kind of have to both inspire your customers, you have to inspire your team, and you have to inspire yourself, I find. And I've broken them down around the same ones, but really kind of refined them depending on the audience. I look at this again, cybersecurity wise, I look at everything as being a social engineering test. I'm not the best hands-on keyboard penetration tester, but I can probably talk myself into any building. And I found myself capable of doing that. And that becomes something about understanding how to read somebody and really kind of influence them and get them to do something. And sometimes convince myself, what do I want to do? I want to get out of bed and do this. Here's why. But setting those objectives to what you want to do, and then putting in some measurable outcomes. So it has to, again, be something that inspires people to follow you or you to follow yourself, that has a measurable outcome, that you're solving a problem. There's a great series of things online and a book, start with why. Why are you doing this? Don't go for the what and the thing. Really try to do this inspirational why of what you're doing, and it will help motivate you and your team and your customers to kind of follow this. And then everything else becomes supporting documentation.
Yeah, I think two other points on the business plan. One, socialize it, talk about it with other people, run it by other people, see if it passes the red face test. We're all really good at talking. I don't know about you, but I'm really good at talking myself into lots of things. This makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
But tell it to somebody that's not in the industry. Tell it to somebody that is in the industry. Tell it to somebody that might be a target customer down the road, target client down the road, and see if it holds water. And then the other one is think about how long you can go as part of the business plan. What does the runway look like? How long can you go? How long can you afford to go? How long can you support wise from your family, your partner, the people around you go without in order to make this successful? And we'll talk a little later as well about know how you're going to go out as you're going in.
Yeah, is this going to be a lifelong thing? Or are you saying, hey, I want to go to market, I want an early exit, but having those options laid out will help orient you. And they're not fixed in stone. Again, about a business plan, it should be almost a living document at times. Or it should be. I wouldn't say at times. It really should be. It's something you revisit and say, based on new information, I'm going to adjust.
Yep. Well, in the agile lifestyle, we iterate and iterate and iterate.
Iterate.
Well, I think it was you, Doug, that sort of touched on one of my favorite topics, and that's measure. For example, how do you know what success looks like? Okay, I'm planning this great idea. I'm going to, make $1 million. I'm going to, save the security field or whatever. What's a success in those situations?
Yeah, and that could be very subjective and objective. I mean, you really have to understand what that measurement of success is. There's different ways to slice and dice the financial numbers. So you can look at things like top line revenue. But the problem is, if I make $1 million, but it costs me $1.5 million, pretty high burn rate to lose money. Do I have the ability to have that longer runway till I get to the point where I'm making, breaking even, $2 million, $3 million, what is that going to look like? So measuring your revenue is one thing, but also calculating your costs. And again, why it's important to have that business plan. So you kind of foresee some of that, forecast what's coming in and out, and continuing to adjust that. And you really have to understand, the difference between products and services are going to have different numbers. For services, I might be more focused on the gross margin on something if I'm selling a service at $10,000 fixed fee, but it's only costing me, it's costing me $8,000 in the first couple iterations to do it, but I get it down to $2,000. Better margins cannot be sustainable. Is that a metric I want to aim for? Whereas maybe I'm developing a product and I want to say I need $500,000 and 500,000 enterprise seats. Different metrics. So you have to really depend on what you're selling and decide what are those metrics of success and how you're going to look at it both financially on top line, but also to your gross profit.
And do those metrics scale? The metrics for success in unit 1 are way different than the metrics for success at unit 500,000.
Definitely.
All right. So I know what I'm doing. I know what my capabilities are. I've got my business plan. Can I start making money?
Absolutely. Just sign up with dananddoug.com. No. If we had a pyramid scheme, it would be great, but I'd probably overly think it and just shoot myself in the foot. But yeah, it's tough. Making money is good, and you have, again, those top line revenues, but forecasting in things such as all these ancillary expenses and taxes is a trick. And you really have to understand that, once you start making money, and the goal is you can't burn money for years on end and have deductions, at a certain point, the government's going to say, okay, how are you still sustaining this business if you're losing money year after year? They're going to want to see some profits, and from those profits, they want taxes. And so different ways to have those taxes are going to be collected on, whether it's on an individual basis, whether it's coming through a paycheck, whether you're doing a corporate structure that flows through. But the idea is you need to start calculating that. One of the pitfalls I will unabashedly say that I screwed up on, particularly being in my early 20s, is having a level of success and not planning for that and saying, this is awesome. I can spend all this money. I'll figure out the taxes later at the end of the year going, holy crap.
Hold on. You're saying that's not how we're supposed to do it?
Not supposed to do that way. I found that out the hard way. That oh my God, I own $15,000, but I was like, I bought a new car. What am I? Can I just? And they're like, no, you actually have to pay the tax. I was like, that sucks. Planning for that, holding it aside, doing quarterlies or doing payroll. And again, as we talked early on, I mean, that's part of that entrepreneur myth, is that you think all this money is mine. It's like, no, it's not. And that's where it comes to calculating margins and everything else, because in the end of the day, you have to have a certain level of business acumen to understand what's coming out of your coffers to various people as well as the government. And it's not all yours.
Yeah, and the best advice is talk to a tax advisor as you're setting this up. Look at the models the models of how you intend to generate revenue. Look at your own personal income streams. If you have other income streams, if you're doing this supplementally, because things like LLCs that are taxed as partnerships hit your own personal tax rate. So if you have a full-time job and you're doing this, your effective profits will get taxed just like your along with your other income. So there's a lot of thought that goes into the structure, and you can similarly, LLCs are really easy to set up, but some of the corporation structures, C and S corps, are a little harder, but they're harder up front, but they have greater tax benefits down the road. So definitely talk to a tax advisor once you've got your business plan together and see what makes the most sense. The other thing is there is no such thing as an LLC structure in the U.S. tax code. The states have it, but the U.S. tax code doesn't. So you can pick whether it's taxed as a corporation or taxed as an individual. The answer is it's complex, or the TLDR is it's complex, but the decisions you make up front are hard to undo down the road.
Absolutely.
So put some thinking into it.
Yeah, because that comes down to your exit strategy. When we talk about these corporate structures, a C corp is going to have different advantages and is generally more sought after by investors. So whether it be angel investors, VCs, because of the preferred stock options that they get on that, and it's much more beneficial for an investor as well as the tax purposes. Where something like an LLC and an S corp, that money technically flows through in the end to your personal tax statements on a Schedule C. Again, a whole bunch of work that you have to do on that, pluses and minuses. But if your exit is to possibly get funding, it's not that you can't redo those structures. It's harder. So you want to think about that early on is what am I going to do with this corporation? How do I want to bring in other people? It's fine. I don't know, like 3 LLCs, and they do small little things here and there. And I don't have any intention to bring in other people. They're just for me, my little pet projects on things. But my wife said startups where we've had, CNS corps because we wanted funding, we wanted investors. So you really have to kind of pick that on early on and what your end goal is going to be in this whole thing.
And the other thing is what you want to do with the profits. If you want to keep the profits over long-term to reinvest them, the corp structures make more sense because LLCs basically get taxed and cashed out at the end of every tax year against your taxes.
Yeah, that's basically a good way to think about it is at the end of the year, do you want to keep all that money? We all do. Or do you want to reinvest it and build something that's outside of yourself, so to speak?
Yep.
Yeah, I had to chuckle there with your story, Doug. I was had my own consulting company, was in my early 20s, and discovered the whole tax thing. And in my case, it was $11,000.
Yeah, all this stuff that this presentation is built on a lot of tears. There's some blood and sweat there, but gosh, there's a ton of tears too.
I feel better now about my $2,500 sales tax misstep. So,
I was 6,000. I was in New York State. Trust me, it's much worse.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So we've all been there.
Yeah.
Yep. Learning experiences.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, okay, so now I've got the money and the customers just kind of flow in, right?
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. Not so fast, my young friend. Yeah, no, I mean, I guess in some cases they do because you're going to have built out a network. And I guess I'll take a pause to say that if you're going to do something like this, it's really, really, really important to have and build upon the network of people that you know and trust to start. They're going to be the people you socialize your business plan with. They're going to be the people you ask when you go to some funding rounds and say, do you believe in what we're doing? And, do you want to invest in this? But they're also going to be the people you say, hey, put the word out, talk to the people you know. And if you see somebody that has interest, do a referral. That's the best way to start up your go-to-market. But beyond that, there's a lot more to it in terms of getting on the market.
Yeah, I would say a lot of it too is that, I've adopted The way I look at business planning, go-to-market strategies is the way I look at cooking. If I'm going to cook something, I'm going to Google a bunch of different things and probably do an 80-20. 80% of it that looks the same, I'm going to use, and the 20% is going to be my own spices. And I tend to do that with the go-to-market strategies. You're looking at things like, the lean methodologies or the enterprise operating system that uses traction. They both have very, similar ideas, is that you don't want to overcomplicate the process too much. Is how quickly can you get to that idea, the MVP or most viable product, something that early adopters will adopt, can allow you to get some feedback and decide whether you want to pivot. The idea that you want to get to something very quickly that fails or succeeds, hope and fail quickly, fail and move on. You don't want to sit there and continue to do a lot of sunk costs off it in both time and money off of things that might not flesh out. Again, your idea is great in your head. As you go to market with it, you're going to get a ton of feedback from people that can completely erase what you thought was a good idea and make you go somewhere else. Be open to that. And you have to have that flexibility. And that's why you put in these entrepreneurial operating systems, whether it be kind of, again, traction or lean or just some of these others that allows you to build that framework of saying, here's, again, KPIs and measurable outcomes. I'm going to go to market with this, get this feedback. I want this many customers. I want this many outreach. Here's the type of feedback. I'm going to pivot and move on. But you want to be able to kind of be flexible as you go early on, as you adapt these new products. And that can be a foundation for how you're going to do a lot of things. Maybe you have this idea as a software engineer for one product, but say, back in my mind, I have 3 others. Build out a repeatable process that can be used in the first one that can then be your DNA for doing others. So having that go-to-market strategy that's repeatable becomes really important as you try to scale.
Yeah. So you mentioned MVP, Doug, and I'm going to take this on a quick aside. So many of the people that I work with are in this battle. They're not doing security products, but they're in this battle between MVP and securing your product or building privacy into their product. In the people in this talk and in our worlds, security and privacy are the MVP.
Yeah.
How do you advise folks around finding that balance between MVP and putting the right level of security? Because I think we all know that security is overhead until it's not.
I wish I can say my experience, your mileage may vary, but working with startups and advising them, and I've worked with folks in either Boomtown or some of these other incubators, and I said, this is a great product, but you're really doing some healthcare stuff. How are you sanitizing the data? How are you, depersonalizing some of this data that you're using? Oh, we don't take any of this data in. I highlight some issues about why that's still an issue, and then somebody maybe in a project engineering team did take over the sensitive data. I said, well, you guys kind of have some hotspots here. And they say, well, look, we're so early in this. We don't want to invest a lot of time or money in research around data privacy and security. We might pivot off of this. We might go to a completely different direction 3 months from now. We might get funding and go to a different direction. So we don't care about it now. And I kind of get where they're coming from. I hate to hear that because in my DNA is security and privacy, but that's how a lot of early stage startups look at it. The issue that becomes is as they continue to grow, and if that product sticks, they're never going back and adding security. It's got to be data security and data privacy by design. And if you don't, it's really, really hard and then becomes even more cost, prohibitive to try to add that on later on.
But on the flip side, I do some work with private equity and VC, and the valuation of companies that have taken that into account from the beginning is way higher when they go to get acquired or exit. Yep. So it's pay me now or pay me later, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's, really kind of comes down, as we're saying, you really got to figure out what that first 3 to 6 months is going to look like, and getting those early adopters and what those truly early adopters are going to look like, and what type of feedback are they going to get, knowing they're not going to have a fully baked product, but they want to be part of that journey, and your early adopters are going to be critical in choosing who they're going to be. It's not somebody that is going to be that you're selling them this idea of over promising and under delivering. You want quite the opposite. So you continue to get that feedback, because you kind of want to give to get, you want to put something out there, get feedback, build something better. And you want to grow fast or die slow. One of this idea, this tempo of moving through things. I hate the idea if something can be done, if somebody's telling me something it's going to take a year to get done and I can find efficiencies to get it done in 3 months, I'm still going to say I want to get it done in 2 months. I mean, that's just something that you kind of want to look at in the current market as you're developing, is how you can just quickly grow, fail, love it, and move on. And it's that in itself can be an exhausting emotional roller coaster.
Yeah, without question. Without question. Well, and as you're doing it, at some point, you're going to have to tell people about what it is you're doing. Let's shift in a little bit into the marketing. The what do we have? And you touched a couple, like give to get, grow faster, die slow. But where do you put your head when it comes to shopping the product out there, and when do you start?
Early. There's a couple examples of startups that did A/B testing off of a landing page on a website in Google AdWords to gather information before they even had a product. Nothing wrong with that. It's just getting the type of feedback of what's out there for, removing your bias in this process. Again, your biases in this process are going to screw you over and what you think is great. And being so married to an idea that you can't let it go, that you don't become open to getting feedback. So getting out there and marketing things and being able to gather that information is great, because there's times, and it's good and bad. You have to kind of fake it till you make it. You don't always know what's out there, but again, you don't want to promise something you can't deliver on. So there's a huge pitfall in that. But you have to kind of do it early on to really try to build that energy and momentum. A lot of marketing is salesmanship and social engineering. If you think of really good ways that you can talk your way into things, I mean, that's what early marketing is, and getting that feedback. But again, you just don't want to build vaporware to the point where it's something that's not going to perform. And we've certainly seen many documentaries on that, from HBO to YouTube. There's just a ton of information out there about what not to do. Definitely don't do that. But there's definitely a lot of resources now that I didn't have when I started. When I started my computer consulting business, I had to buy space in the Yellow Pages 3 months before it was published, determine where it was going to go, coordinate that with radio ads and television, radio ads and newspaper ads to try to stagger these. It was like $4,000 or $5,000 all in. And then maybe in 18 months, I would start seeing things because it was sitting around. Whereas now, as I can instantly, when I was doing my first cyber startup in New York, I was getting feedback on AdWords at like pennies per hour. Like, I knew what was going and what was working. I was able to shift focus. Again, my bias was, when I was doing computer forensics, that I was advertising computer forensics. I don't look at things as Apple OS and PC OS as Apple or PCs. No, they're computers in my mind, because I'm an elitist snob and I know better than everybody. It's why people hire me. However, the end buyer was Googling Apple forensics, PC forensics. Those were the highest words performing that were nobody was buying. As soon as I bought them, I saw an uptick in sales. So I had to be able to sit there and gather that marketing information and pivot off my own biases to get more of what I wanted, and say, okay, I have to shift my messaging. Understanding, again, that messaging early on and being able to adopt and change it became really important. And there's a ton of benefits of having that out right now, between social media, Google AdWords, you name it. You can build a brand and image online, get a lot of feedback early on in your development process to pivot and make something better before you invest too much time.
Yeah. You mentioned about vaporware, and I guess I want to call out one point around the fine line between vaporware and pivoting due to demand. I think vaporware is vaporware takes on a term. It's taken on this notion of it's a product that you put out there that doesn't ever actually make it as it was originally sold. But at the same time, we have all of these resources that are telling us what the market wants, and they may be different than what we started out expecting. And we pivot. A key to making sure that your pivot doesn't look like vaporware is transparency. Is being clear in your marketing and being clear in the communications that you're having to say, hey, we've come to this. We realize this isn't really what you want, and here's where we're going to go with it. And then starts to solicit feedback on that. But being clear, not just abandoning and not telling anybody why, but being clear about the change. You'll build a lot of trust and in your brand at the same time, as well as bringing people along as you round the bend on the pivot.
Yeah, no, I think that's what's really important now. Is kind of the other side of that coin, is being a thought leader in that space. and not just producing another webinar or white paper that's clearly selling your product. You want to be able to say, look, here's a problem in the marketplace. We want to address it. We're missionaries when it comes to this. Great. Our product might solve that problem, but we want to talk about the problem and how it's affecting customers. As an aside, our product kind of does that, but kind of bury the lead about your product a little bit and let people see you as a contributor to the industry, whatever industry that is, and particularly in cyber. We've seen a lot of the successful startups that have worked, and just to name names with no attachment to them, but like I watched what Duo did. I mean, they were really good early on about their documentation on their website, talking to people, and the way that they were problem solvers that their product just happened to work really well on. And I thought, strategies like that work really well.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you, at the risk of plugging a podcast that is not the first or second highest in all of Colorado, the Cybersecurity Vendor Relationship Podcast. If you're going into marketing, listen to that one, because it really will tell you all the things that the people that buying security products never want to hear from marketing. It's a really interesting journey into the mind of the security buyer.
Yep.
Okay, well, now for the programmer in me looks at this as CDCI. I'm successful. I'm starting to make money. I've hired people. When do I sort of go back and check out what I did and maybe make a course correction along the way?
Yeah. A good, obviously good yearly measurings is great. You can build quarterly in that. You have to find the cadence and operational tempo that's going to work for your organization. But obviously a year good back is a fair milestone. You don't want to compress things down to days necessarily as far as measurements of success. There might be instances where you do, but really like taking things back and looking back throughout a year and say, okay, well, what worked and what didn't? And again, being open to abandoning those things that, and again, you're going to have these biases. You're going to be so beholden to an idea until you put the numbers around it and say, Jesus, this did not sell at all. Or this concept just did not hit. We just don't have the numbers to support doing this, dropping that. And we kind of like use that 80-20 rule of get rid of the 20% that doesn't work. That's probably eating up 80% of your time because you're just so focused on it. Focus on the 20% of what's successful that's going to drive 80% of your success. And you need to be able to do that and be honest about yourself and get input from other people. But again, you got to gather that data over the year and know what those metrics of success are going to be early on. It's a scientific experiment. You need to know what your measurable outcome is going to be.
Right. But at the same time, it's really easy now with all of the instant feeds of data to go and start to tweak on a moment-by-moment basis all of your business plans. So without a strong business plan, it's really easy, just like with any strategy, it's really easy to get off course through a series of small moment-by-moment, this is the data I have today, distractions. Without a good strategic, here's what I'm trying to accomplish, you can find you end up way off in left field without really realizing it. So just be conscious of how often and how dramatically you're making small tweaks that seem small at the time, but over time, when added up together, can make for some pretty significant changes to the business that you're making.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, annual budget planning, annual business planning is really long in the security world. I think in some companies I've seen people doing security budgeting and security tactical planning on a sprint by sprint basis, which can be a week or two. What's next? So all of those come into play when looking at, do I stay or do I go?
Mm-hmm.
And what about the exit? What about the decision to just bail?
Grab a bottle of whiskey and head for the sun. Yeah, it's a tough thing. And I tell everybody, you should always have an exit strategy. One of the things I encourage even my employees to do, like, oh, we're getting all these recruiters hitting me up. I was like, call them. They're like, well, I don't want to go anywhere. I was like, I don't get feedback. You want to know what is going to happen. I was like, you never know what's going to happen in an organization, whether you're working for someone or not, is you want to have backup plans. I again can be kind of jaded from a lot of that, where I've taken on a tremendous amount of risk as an entrepreneur, as an entrepreneur, and knowing, like, just thinking I bet too much down and I didn't have an exit strategy, and then all of a sudden when the rug gets pulled out of you, you're starting all over. So you want to kind of figure out what that's going to look like, whether it's going to be something for financial gains, whether it's going to be retirement, mini retirement, whether you have passive supplemental income. What do you want to do? At what point is it you've achieved your mission and you're not getting what you want out of it anymore, or there's no more ideas to chase down? I think that becomes an important way to look at things, of whether I should stay or go, is what's the next thing? And that's for me. And I would think for a lot of people that I talk to that have been entrepreneurs, they get cagey. They want to solve new problems. And once you start running out of problems, idle hands, the devil's plaything, and you want other things. So I think early on you have to be honest with yourself of what that exit's going to look like. Again, whether it's going to be financial, whatever metrics that you either brought in a series of investors and they bought you out, or you're selling the company. When I did my first cyber product services was either I was going to take on investors, I was going to continue to bootstrap it, or I was just going to fold it into another organization. And that's what I did. I brought it into a different company and then took that office that I built in New York City and expanded a practice at another company. But I had to kind of figure out, a couple different options and then play to whatever was going to work out based on the science and the data. What was financially going to make sense for me and my family at that time. And those are the choices you have to make.
Yeah, I think the two things to focus on there. One is yourself and your family. As you're doing this, don't underestimate the importance of the support around you in order to make this successful. And if you don't have the support from your partner, family, child, etc., really think twice. Really look twice into should I stay or should I go? It's way more impactful than I think most people let themselves realize as they're in it. And then the other is things like looking at imposter syndrome, looking at people feeling, I guess, actually, before we get to imposter syndrome, shelf life. I don't know about you, but I look at myself and I know exactly what the calendar will say when I start to get itchy on something. If it hasn't materially changed, I can almost count it to the day when it'll be time to make a change or time to make sure that my job has materially changed in some way to keep me interested. Put that into your calculus too, both as you're starting and as you're looking at, is this the time to make some changes?
Yeah, and one other thing I'll kind of toss in here, if no one minds, is having had the privilege of having a couple of businesses fail underneath me, you invest a lot of time, effort, energy, and emotion into it. And if you don't have an exit strategy, frankly, it hurts a lot worse.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you never want to be caught flat-footed. Always know what your next step could be. You may not, or what your three options for your next step could be.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I've also in a lot of this, and we'll share some of my resources, but a lot of that kind of like stoicism that's built into business planning. But what does failure look like? What is the worst case scenario? Let me plan for that and work backwards, and prepare for that. Because I think people are so scared that they are going to fail, and this becomes a thing in their mind that they keep doubling down, and they just lose focus on at a moment where they could have gotten out and moved on to something else, and they hurt relationships, they hurt themselves. I've seen people with drug and alcohol problems. They just completely tank everything because they're just beholden on this idea that they can't fail. And you need to know what failure looks like and be reasonable about it and be dispassionate in knowing when to get out.
And lean into failure. Yeah. Failure is not bad.
The only way to learn.
Exactly. I learned more from failing than from succeeding.
Fail upwards.
So the next thing I was going to ask, which I think we might have actually touched on everything, would be pitfalls and sinkholes. Or
there's always more stories to tell.
Yeah. Well, I think Danny, you touched on one. I mean, let's kind of with imposter syndrome. I mean, that's a common one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 25 years in this, and there are days where you get into it and you say, are they going to figure out that I don't know what I'm talking about? It's real. It happens to all of us. If you're going in the Colorado Equal Security Slack, you'll see this discussion coming up regularly. How do I get past this? How do I get rid of it and never have it come back? I don't think that's realistic. I think it will come back. I think it also keeps you on your toes. And if you just make sure you don't let it get to you. Easier said than done, of course. Yeah. But realize that it's something that can propel you to continue to learn, but also is likely mostly in your head.
Yeah. And, a part of that I think becomes a dangerous compound issue is burnout.
Oh, yeah.
Is that you just I got to keep going. I got to keep them. They're going to know. They're going to figure me out. And it's like, dude, nobody knows everything. And you almost become this kind of Zen master after years of just beating yourself up to say, it's okay not to know everything. And you need to set yourself away from the problems in the business. You need an escape, whether it's meditation, whether it's bike riding, whether it's just something healthier that's existential to your home office, your business. Get out and do something, write, journal, just anything. You need to build yourself a lot of time and space. And I found it was really important to build structure. I'm a big fan of inbox zero, of not sitting in inboxes all day, of setting aside specific time to do emails. I have deep work scheduled on my calendar for certain times of the day where I have to focus, and knowing that 5:30, 6 o'clock, I'm 100% not 100% good at this, but trying to walk away from it all. Being able to still having to do a lot of incident response and stuff. I'm a victim to clients call me, but I also have to know, like, if there's nothing going on at 4 o'clock and there's no reason to keep burning myself out, I'm tired, just step away and encourage others in my organization to do it, because I'd rather somebody come back fresh than burnt out a week later. It's why I've even told people that have worked for me, I will DDoS your phone if I catch you working on vacation, because I am a capitalist at heart. I want them coming back working 100%. I don't want somebody coming back not well rested. So you need to build that into yourself too, is that you're, end of the day, we do some serious stuff. And I've talked to a lot of people on the podcast, and I've worked against some nasty state actors, but we're not curing cancer. We're not on the front lines of COVID. We're doing tech crap because somebody misconfigured an RDP server 90% of the time.
Right.
The reality is, like, you need to put it into context and know when to step away from it all.
I worked for a company based in Amsterdam, and it was a bank, and they really knew how to do vacations. I got to give the Dutch credit. There's amazing, a month, basically it's a month away, and it's disconnection. And one of my good friends there, when I was working, I was lamenting that I had to take a 2-week vacation by process. And his comment to me was, Dan, you're not that important. The company was here long before you. It'll be here long after you. Walk away, come back refreshed, and you'll be way more valuable when you come on the other side of it all.
Yeah.
And it was the truest words.
So true. Every time I process map things for when we talk about early stage, I design every product or service to get myself completely out of the business so I can stop. But that's a measure of success, is I can take off for 2 weeks and I come back and everybody's like, yeah, everything worked fine. Then I know I can move on to the next idea if I'm not having to put out 90 fires.
Yeah, the VCSO world, that's what I engineer my service to be, is you do it and then you build them up so that they can hire somebody or have it on their own, and you leave. What else on the pitfalls? I think that just overselling what you do, as opposed to telling people what you can and can't do, and being honest with them. You as a smaller company, you can't necessarily compete against large established business right away. So be honest. You may be able to get it better on price. You may be able to give them more personalized service and support than they would get from a larger service or a larger product. But don't oversell it, because they're going to remember it, and it's going to affect your reputation down the road. And Doug, you made the comment earlier about what it is that people are buying. People are buying you.
Yeah.
People are buying on you and your reputation, and the confidence that you will be able to deliver. No pressure. But it's about you. So give people honesty and transparency. And people are buying on ethics these days, more and more too.
Yeah, you see, there's that Warren Buffett statement that it takes years to build a reputation and seconds to ruin it. And I've seen a lot of people do that, is taking on more they can do. And I found a way to mitigate that is, again, as part of your business planning and entrepreneurship and small business, is getting out there and networking with other folks with inside your industry, competitors. Like, I try to be as friendly with my competitors. Sometimes I might not be able to sell something because I'm at capacity and I want to be able to pass it off to somebody else, knowing that, yeah, maybe that might be a client that follows them. Maybe it won't, but honestly, the client's going to be happy that they're being served. You're being honest with them about what they can do. And if you're looked at by the perspective of you're still solving your client's problems, they're going to remember that and be more appreciative of that than when you really screw up on something you don't know what you're doing or don't have time for.
Yeah. And similarly, we're in a field. Security is a field that's always been about collaboration and sharing.
Yeah.
Even amongst competitors in some of the industries, if the business people the companies I worked with knew the relationships that we had across all of the competitive landscape, the strength of those relationships, they would have been floored, because they compete at a very visceral level and we collaborate because we are all after a common good, after a common enemy. But use your network, use your friends, use the people in the local community to help bounce ideas off of or fill in gaps. I'm the first to ask questions. Hey, I'm at this part, I need this help in this space, can somebody fill me in? And back to give back that same thing to the community as well. And it helps all of us.
Yep.
One of the things that's been kind of touched on here, and I just kind of want to bring it out for a little bit more examination, is when you start your own company, you got this great technical idea, you got this great marketing idea or whatever, and you quickly realize there's more to it than writing a piece of software or selling the piece of software. There's all sorts of things outside of it. One of the little notes here I chuckled at, because I found this out the hard way myself, was legal counsel.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's all the unfun stuff.
Well, it's like, and that's again when there's, there's in this world now, again, where there's a greater focus on this fractional business to business set of services. You can get, where the landscape's kind of flattened a bit. You can get legal advice, tax advice. You can Google some of yourself, do your own research, but hire professionals. You can be at least a little bit educated before you go in and talk to people, so you're not spending a lot of money and time on somebody educating you. You want to validate a lot of things, go in with your own notes, do your own homework, but getting out there and getting good business attorneys, contract attorneys, IP attorneys for different things I do. I have 3 or 4 different business attorneys doing different things. I don't pay a lot, over across all of them, but my expectation is there's not going to be a one-stop shop. Not like I don't expect somebody to hire me as a one-stop shop for cybersecurity. I don't go to my general practitioner or doctor when I needed, a GI surgery, last year. I go to a specialist, and you want to find those specialists that are narrow focused on what they do, have a good referral rating, and you find out through, again, business networking, who to talk to. And you get out there and find those types of things, because you're going to need those corporate documents, depending on the corporate structure that you need. You're going to need contracts, MSAs. A lot of small business owners don't think about things like the most exciting stuff that I did last night was rereading indemnification clauses, uncapped liability, reps and warranties. Thank God I'm still doing that in cybersecurity. But that's like types of things that you have to spend time on. And luckily, again, why I'm an entrepreneur, I don't understand this, and I give it to my inside counsel, who marks it up and sends it back and approves things. But, having that somebody to bounce these things off of, so you don't put yourself in an unnecessary risky position on one contract.
Yeah, and on the same boat, the insurance, it's not the most exciting topic when you're building a new product or building a new service. But boy, I can't overemphasize the need to think about things like general liability insurance. You're going to need at least $1 million when you when you sign any contract of that. You're going to need errors and omissions. You're going to need disability. What happens if you have contracts and you, God forbid, get injured or hurt and can't fulfill them? Having some insurance to be able to cover the cost, to be able to get somebody to do it, or to cover your costs. And then health insurance. If you're not covered somewhere else, health insurance is really, really, really expensive, and you need to really, really think about it. And then we may not think of needing cybersecurity insurance, but if you're housing any information, it may be a barrier to entry on contracts. Have cybersecurity insurance, tick, or it may be more useful depending on the nature of the business you're in. But think about insurance broadly, because it may prevent you from getting something, or it may save your bacon down the road.
Yeah, I've seen, I've been subject to it where they've asked to see, redacted policy pages and saying, look, when I took on a very large pharmaceutical company doing a lot of their forensics a couple of years ago, when I was a couple companies back, it was a small company. And I said, we got to double our cyber insurance to, it was like $5 million. Like we have like $1 million now. And I'm like, we're not going to get this contract unless we do it. And we did it and it paid off. But, that's one of those things that legally and operationally you need to address those types of costs, because it's not an easy ask. But things like cyber insurance, I tend to work for a lot of those providers. I can't stress enough, having seen a lot of small businesses impacted, how important that is just with the current state of things. Where you can have business interruption, you can have cyber attacks. Generally, a lot of that stuff is not that expensive and well worth having, because I've seen a lot of organizations, quite frankly, be saved from going out of business, but because they had that type of insurance to cover a data breach or an incident.
Yeah. And then things like accounting, getting some kind of a cloud accounting package or a local accounting package, so you can prove to the tax man, see also the slide with Uncle Sam, that you've done what you've done. Paper will work for a while, but the easier it is to get those. The other thing is getting paid. There are clients I have that won't pay check. They will only do ACH.
Yep.
And if you do and a lot of times the only way to enable ACH is to do it through a known accounting package.
Yeah, which then has a fee, and then
yes.
You got to calculate all those costs. It's not a lot, but you start doing
you have
transactional costs. You're like, damn, that's a lot going out. And into accounting, I made a lot of mistakes on that. I had good accounts, but not maybe small business bookkeepers. At the end of the year, they just wanted to see my P&L and my my chart of accounts. I'm like, but here's the whole QuickBooks package. Like, we don't. That's not what we need. I'm like, but this is how I run my business. They're like, that's not what we need for taxes. So there's a huge disconnect inside the financial community when it comes to bookkeeping and accounting. Yeah. And a lot of small business owners think that you're going to get it in one. Often you don't. So finding a good bookkeeper that's keeping day-to-day things that roll up to an end of the year set of schedules on your taxes is important. And then having a good tax advisor that's going to make sure that you're not overstepping on any deductions or anything that you're going to have scrutiny brought back at you, because audits are generally not fun. And knock on wood, I've never had to do that.
Yeah. And depending on your tax structure, they may start finding their way into your personal taxes.
Yes.
So I would say you think you've had subscription fatigue in your personal world between Netflix and others. Wait till you get into the business world. Everything is another $5 or $20, or actually it's more in the $20 to $40 a month range to start for some of these. But put those into the business plan. Start out with that and understand what it's going to cost to run your business, and how long you can go before you have paying customers to do so.
And the fun difference between CapEx and OpEx, and how you're going to amortize things. Again,
but that's another show.
Yeah, there's so many. I wish it was all. There's, I think the takeaway in all this is we're not saying don't do this. Just go in with both eyes open. There's a ton of benefits, but there's so many things that you just go, oh God, this sucks. And look, it's not like you're trading. I think a lot of people think I'm going to leave my current corporate job and I'm going to get rid of that annoying manager or coworkers. Life will find you new annoying things to deal with. And particularly when you're on your own in a business, you're going to find tons of things that annoy the hell out of you. And you're not getting away from that. It comes down to doing things that you feel fulfilling. Do you really wake up and enjoy what you're doing, whether you're working for somebody, whether you're working for yourself? Is it something that gives you fulfillment and that you're happy to look at a extended enough period of time? So damn, I'm glad I did that. That should be your goal.
Yeah. And Doug and I are working on a bunch of resources that go along with the talk today, and have been places we found success. And we'll get the link to Outlast the ISSA to get the link out to everybody that registered. And I think we'll put it in the YouTube as well when it's ready.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been quite an interesting presentation. My thanks to both Dan and Doug. But before we go, is there anything you are working on that you'd like to share with the rest of the people listening?
Yeah, so I'm I've got my company is called Socratic. We're a security and privacy consultancy for small and medium businesses, but also a new project called MentorCore that is all about trying to focus on security, risk, privacy, compliance, and ethics professionals. You'd be surprised how close the security and privacy world are with the ethics and compliance world once you take a look at it, and look at how to help us as a population grow and mentor each other. Not a conversation goes by that with professionals in this area that doesn't end in, well, I could use some mentoring on this topic.
Yep.
So we're trying to put together a community, and then some later some one-to-one mentor matching and other roundtables and such. So stay tuned.
Yeah. And I'm continuing with the podcast. So cybersecurityinterviews.com. The goal of that is, I really found it interesting to go to conferences and have either BarCon or LobbyCon. So off stage talking to either presenter or other people saying, there's a lot of good information we're sharing outside of the formal tracks of an event. This would be cool information to capture, whether it's off the cuff remarks, kind of that fireside chat. So I kind of built the interview format, long form interview, about 45 minutes with different cybersecurity leaders about their journey, what they're seeing, the changes, really this kind of in this natural flow that we had today. So we're up to about episode 90 is coming out in a couple weeks. So it's been a really good journey. And again, one of those things where I give to get, it's really helped me fight my imposter syndrome when I realized the people, you kind of never want to meet your heroes. And when you talk to them, they're like, yeah, I don't know anything. You're like, dear God, don't say that. I was counting on you to save the world. But you start realizing that, and it's been a really good journey and a process to hear others in the cybersecurity space where they came from. And that's the one thing is, look, whether you're starting your own business or you're starting with a company, everybody's journey is different. There's no one way to do it.
Don't wait for your commute to come back before listening to Doug. The episodes Doug just has coming out.
Actually time that based again, feedback and pivoting. It used to be over an hour when people in the tri-state area when I was living in New York said, can you get it down to about 40 to 45 minutes so it matches my commute? That's why I cut it at 45.
Nice. Well, thank you for having us.
Appreciate you, speaking. To be honest, I think this was such an informative talk. Nobody has any questions.
Well, we'll definitely, like I said, I'm almost done with all my extra notes because I wrote out the outline of this a while ago and I was like, oh, there's a couple more things. So we're going to put together a bunch of resources. So it has everything of links to things from the SBA, some of the EMIT stuff we talked about, how to do SWOT analysis. So basically like a recipe for kind of going through our slides and where you can find some of these resources. I hope to have that done today and we'll get that up for the audience shortly. And then once you find it online, we're not hard to find online and you can always ask questions.
Sounds great. Well, to everyone that's listening, that is the talk. Hope to see you all on the Colorado Equals Security Slack channel. And we're going to be having another presentation. Thank you, Doug. We're going to be having another presentation on Thursday. So be sure and check that out.